Racial Justice Sunday today is not new, though I managed 3 ordained decades before I had it pointed out to me. Canon Peter was happy for me to go ahead with it, not least because the pastoral principles I shall mention later are likely to be needed in a great deal in the Church's future. I'll start with 3 stories. I was once a London policeman. One day I was with a colleague standing and watching. A couple came past us. She was white, he was a newly arrived Jamaican. As they passed, my colleague said quietly, but perhaps just loudly enough to be heard, "Slut." Another occasion, I fell into conversation with a black man, and he said, "The trouble is, you think we're all the same. Now I'm different. I come from Trinidad." And then he added, "The Jamaicans are the sweepings of the Caribbean." So, prejudice is not something that is restricted to white Englishmen. Third story. I need to check my own prejudices. A police colleague asked me for advice. His girlfriend was an Indian nurse at the hospital next door to our station. Her father was a businessman in India. Should he marry her? And I suggested that there might be difficulties because of things like culture. And I actually knew nothing about the differences in culture, and I nearly wrecked their relationship. Lord Paul Boateng is the chairman of the Church of England's Racial Justice Commission. He was the first ever black cabinet minister, and he has said, "Racism is the gaping wound in the body of Christ. Every time we succumb to it, we hurt him." And that's why I'm talking about it today. So if racism wounds Jesus and the church, what did he say and do that exposes the sin of racism? Jesus knew the story of God's choosing Abraham to be the father of a nation that would bless all people. He would have seen the escape from slavery in Egypt as evidence of God's love for Israel, and he would have seen the return of exiles from Babylon in much the same light. Israel was and is special. But Jesus was nearly lynched by his own people when he pointed out to them that God's goodness wasn't limited to Israel. He reminded his neighbours that a Phoenician rather than a Jewish widow was chosen to host Elijah during a time of famine, and that Elisha healed a Syrian general of leprosy rather than a Jewish leper. Jesus acted on his understanding. He seems at first to have scorned the Phoenician woman pleading for her daughter, but Jesus enabled her to demonstrate her faith in him as she extended his joke about feeding puppies with the children's food. He even healed a Roman officer's slave. Other people saw the tribe. They saw the religious grouping. Jesus saw the people. Clearly he saw beyond Israel, as he said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all people to myself. But attitudes are one thing, actions are another. So besides the things I've mentioned, what about that overflowing justice that the prophet Amos called for? Or the prophet Micah? What does the Lord require of you? To do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So how is racism denying justice? And to whom is it denying justice? Racial injustice treats people badly for something they have not chosen and have no power to change. And racism perpetuates itself. So, for example, a black person is more than 4 times as likely to be stopped and searched by police as the average for this country. Over 7 times more than a white person. Last year, academics at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh found black-led households reporting discrimination also face a risk of homelessness 50% greater than that of a white-led household, even allowing for their socio-economic characteristics. In 2021, Baroness McGregor Smith's review of race in the workplace said, ethnic minority applicants for Bank of England jobs are less likely to be hired or promoted and are more likely to receive lower bonuses and leave the bank. And she concluded, black and minority ethnic individuals in the UK are both less likely to participate in and then less likely to progress through the workplace when compared with white individuals. And this is despite the fact that white British children do worse than the average at GCSE, and only black Caribbean children and their mixed-race companions do worse still. In 2020, the charity Just for Kids Law reported children from black backgrounds are dramatically more likely to be excluded from school than their peers, are poorly represented amongst the education staff, and are more likely to have their grades underestimated. And the attempt to expel long-term UK residents, members of the Windrush generation, is scandalous. I haven't time for more statistics, but it's clear that race affects opportunities, progress at work, treatment by the police and by politicians. This is already illegal, but attitudes are slow to change. So what should we, the followers of Jesus, do? The recent Church of England document, Pastoral Principles for Living Well Together, speaks of 6 pervading evils, and these are prejudice, fear, silence, hypocrisy, ignorance, and power. At first, we must become aware of them and then address them. We need to acknowledge prejudice, cast out fear, speak into silence, admit hypocrisy, address ignorance, and pay attention to power. And I add, pay attention to who has the power. Of these, I feel that prejudice, fear, and power make an unholy trinity. Immigrants and Jews have been accused of coming to take our jobs. The fear is irrational, but it's powerful, especially when fearful people have great power, including the ability to compel silence and to prevent alternative understandings from replacing ignorance. I end with a reminder of what Jesus said and what the hostile lawyer said that earned Jesus praise and earned the parable of the Good Samaritan. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. And how do we do that? I want to suggest 4 things. Listen, observe, value, encourage. That's not just an acronym, it's a way of life. It's the way of Jesus. Let's follow it.